everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this roundtable. We're going to talk about consortium. Don't be afraid, it's going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. I know consortium can be scary, and consortium doesn't have an S. I'm aware of that. Sorry about that. But we have wonderful speakers to accompany us this morning. So we have with us Lorraine Barlett, who's working for Solidarité. She's going to tell us a bit more about LEARN, which is a consortium that recently started in northern Syria. Thank you very much for being with us. Frédéric Givaudan, who is here. He works for Chameleon. If you don't know Chameleon yet, you should. So it's a good opportunity. And Frédéric he represents the whole consortium, but he works for NRC, which is one of the consortium members. And Michel Sabel, coming all the way from Burkina Faso, who you will see has a very interesting logo. I think that's the most impressive one I've seen in my entire humanitarian life. How many organizations is that? 30. It's a meta-consortium, am I right? One of the meta-consortia of West Africa. There's some of them. My name is Lisa, and I work for Groupe, so we're a research institute. This is my third edition of CartONG, and I moved from one position to the other. And I've never been facilitator. I've been speaker, I've been a little hands volunteer trying to that everything is set up properly. So it's a pretty new role, and I hope I'm a good host. We're going to have 3 presentations. I'm going to be super strict on time. So we had a little brainstorm, and we discovered that the most interesting roundtables so far were the ones where presentations were short. And also, I'm going to ask you guys to speak as much as you can about your personal experience, to be as analytical as you can, not too descriptive, so that we can make this roundtable interesting, is useful for you guys. I wanted to start by asking you a couple of questions. I stole that to Mev, she's not in the room, right? Yesterday, I thought that was interesting. So who in the room has worked for or with a consortium of organizations? Whether from HQ, in the field? Okay, it's about half of you. Who has been involved in designing a consortium or meta-consortium? Okay, so I think you're going to know what we're going to talk about then. The challenges that it can be to design a good consortium. Now, is there any solution provider in the room? No? Only practitioners? Okay, so my question is answered. Why consortium? So I was lucky this year to be part of the organizing steering committee for this CartONG, and together with Edmond here from CartONG, we suggested this topic because we had worked for consortia, many consortia in the past, and we know how hard it is to be good enough in IM in consortia. So I'm gonna reuse what Caroline was saying in the previous roundtable, for those of you who weren't there. So you talked about some sort of a good enough trap. That's something that I've seen in consortium with myself and with my colleagues. So like, we run into the consortium, we spend as little time as we can preparing it so that it doesn't cost too much money. We hope it's as efficient as it can, meaning as little cost, there's a fewer costs possible involved in information management. And then we say, yeah, but that's the best we could do, you know? So it's okay, it's good enough. But I would say in consortium, it doesn't really work that way. Because most of the time you do have the time, so if you take the time and if you anticipate right, you might actually be prepared so that your consortium has good data management practices, tools, methodologies, and everything, and then it can actually serve the activities. That's kind of the idea that I had. So when we talk about consortium, it originally sounds like a nightmare. First, you cannot yell to your manager, please include information management in your design. Please give me a line, a budget line. Please put some information management people, some experts. Please, 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 please. Doesn't really work most of the time. Then during, it's about defining who does what. So it can, look like, that's a pretty simple one from a Mali consortium, but it can actually look like a really crazy mapping of roles and responsibilities. Then it's about, all right, I have data, I need to share data with another organization that is different from me, like it's not me, so do I really want to share? Like, am I losing competitive advantage in some market share by sharing my data? Like, and is it protected enough? Frédéric is going to talk about some of that in his presentation. And then after it's like, okay, it's been 3 years, this is all my data, I'm going to put it in this super data warehouse, and hopefully there will be someone, like a super data scientist, that is going to make sense out of this, and I can send a beautiful report. But it's also an opportunity. So just to finish with this introduction, I was working with Solidarité Internationale before, and it was an interesting experience this summer. I had just left, and I was the one yelling to my managers, please include information management in everything you're doing. And they were like, and then Learn happened. So this big ass consortium you're gonna see. It's like OFDA basically splitting Syria in 4 and saying, I'm gonna put millions on the table, you guys just take it and do something amazing with it. And so I just bumped into an IT guy in Solidarité, and he's like, oh my god, since Learn, we're actually talking about IM and HQ. So it's like everyone is coming to your table, you were the person no one was coming close to your office, and they're like, oh, what are you working on? Do you have a solution for gathering all the data at the same place? And do you have a platform that can work with us? And suddenly everyone shows up at your meeting. It's before it was 3 people, and now it's 15 people, and top management is there. So it's also an opportunity because it's more money, because it's a higher volume, it's more visibility for the organization and more risks. Then it will actually bring more resources in it. So here are my questions for you guys. So we prepared it with Edmond. So when you talk about consortium, what are the different levels of information management? We're talking about raw data, monitoring and evaluation data, program reporting and accountability. What are we interested in? What are we materializing or not? How is information management approached when building a consortium? Which level of investment and which duration and goals? What is realistic? What should you plan for? How is data sharing structured? Should you have data sharing agreements? With who? And how do we cope with the different practices and sometimes ideologies of the members when it comes to IM, right? If I'm a pro-open source organization and I have a consortium with someone that is different from me, how do I manage this? What's the compromises? Where do I set? So that's my intro, and I'm going to give the floor to Michel to start with the Fonds Fiduciaire Urgence Résilience.
Hi everybody. So my presentation is something between fail-fast and good enough. Why this logo? Just because at 30 organizations, to find the color of the one we want, which doesn't look like this one, or too blue, or too green, or it's already a nightmare. So we decide just to avoid that, and we put all of them in it. Okay, sorry. So the overall program started in May and finished in January 2020. So 2 years and a half, something like that, and it's focusing on resilience. Around 32 million euro, and about 900,000 people. So resilience. So we work on all these activities. Yeah, health. Food security, nutrition, food security, water and sanitation, livelihood, DRR, governance, and peace, resolution of peace, conflict. And we have some research to see which kind of activities we have to put, which is the best combination of these activities. We are working through social services, technical services, and local services to reach the beneficiaries. We enforce the work with this one to be sure that we have a long-term approach. So 5 consortium, 30 members, and we work on 52 communes on these 4 regions. So I'm working there. Actually, these 5 consortium created a cell to make the communication, to work on communication, to work on monitoring evaluation, to work on IM actually. So we work on, we collect data from them, we synthesize it, and we propose to the European Union some visibility, some program monitoring. We are working with the general public, again, to make some visibility of the program. We work with national institutions to combine data and to provide them with information for the overall program, to show them how this integrate their national strategy or policy. And we work with other NGOs to find synergy and to find opportunities of networking with these 30 members. Okay, so for example of what we do, program monitoring, okay, we can go there. Okay, so for program monitoring, the thing is we do not have any kind of contractual link with the donor. These 5 consortiums have, but we don't. So they are asking us to have an overall view of the program, but not based on the logical framework. Or actually, it was difficult to do it on the logical framework because the indicators are not updated at the time people ask us some information on the program. They can ask us whenever they want, actually. So we were looking at how we can do that, how we can report on collecting these 30 members' data and to show something anytime they want. Yeah. So we focus just on some specific elements like number of beneficiaries average, and to try to collect data really quickly from these 30 members. That was challenging, and we do some cartographic visualization. Yeah, cool. So to do that, they all have a logical framework, these 30 or these 5 consortia. So we try to find a way to have the same data coming from all of them. Right? We just decide to have activities. So these activities are specific for one, yeah. But these health, nutrition, etc., they all have common sectors. So we put colors to decide at which level you are. That you are at the beginning of the activity, are you implementing it, are you finishing it. And so they put colors there, they put numbers of beneficiaries there, and we combine all of this. We combine all of this for these 30 members in sectors, and we are able to see where they are on the implementation of these sectors. Yeah. And we put maps. This is for one activity or one sector. We map it and we provide the number of beneficiaries and the percentage of implementation. Yeah. So when I saw the presentation up to now, this map have been done on just a software. I just try to do it by myself for all of this, and it's colored with Visio. So with Excel and Visio, I do not have any other software. Okay. NG involvement in national response plan. They want, or we try to show how the program integrates these national policies. For for food security response plan and for the IYCF, ANGE, those for nutrition actually. They have national plan at Burkina, and we have to show to them how this program integrates this national policy or this national strategy. For that, we did we collect the database at village level, and we ask all these members, these 30 members and more, to provide data, as well as the World Bank, USAID, etc., etc. Actually, nobody was doing it at that time. Not OCHA, nobody. Nobody was there to collect this data, and this data from the NGO, nobody at all. So we just tried to collect, and it was bigger, actually it's bigger than the specific consortium. We go through the coordination, the specific coordination, and we provide these services to them. So they all provide data at village level to put in this database, and we provided maps with the same tools that I presented before to show where they are. This is for food security, cash transfer. If partners were covering the entire commune or not, yeah? And we provide these tools, this information at national level. We were talking yesterday on how to push people to provide. Or maybe then the next one. So this is another one, yeah, for the cash transfer. One of these is to provide the NGO who give you the data, and I was showing it at coordination level. So those who didn't provide it called me the next day and say, "Oh, I was not in your map, so please can I send you now the data I have?" Working quite well. So at the end of this exercise, OCHA came in the country and they took over, and we provide them with all the data we collected. OCHA is leaving on December, so they were there 3-4 months, and now there is no more capacity in the country, except what they do. Okay. Sharing group publicities among members. A bit challenging because nobody has time to do that. They want to focus on implementation, and especially the first year, so nobody has time to share practices. So it was a bit difficult, and they didn't want to spend too much time. So what we tried to do is to codify, that I will show you just after, the different activities, and try to find similarities and provide reports. Yeah. Next one. This is an example of the way the same activity is presented in the logical framework. So it doesn't help too much to find the similarities between what different people do. Yeah. So we just try to put, okay, what is the first criteria is health, working on health. You are working on nutrition, specific nutrition, prevention. And what do you do there? Are you providing financial, are you distributing things? Are you elaborating some guidelines, etc., training, etc.? And another criteria. And based on this one, we did tables like this to find so 4 of them are working on GASPA, on a group of learning, etc., etc. And try to find what was the common things and provide reports. And these reports are provided not only to members, but at the coordination level. Yeah? This technical coordination level, there is several in Burkina. So we are provided to all members, or not all members, all actors which are working in this field. So they can, after that, they can see that they are working together for the same thing. And after that, they can discuss between them or come back to me and say, we want you to work on this. Yeah? So this is not working at all, actually, because nobody came to me, except one, because they didn't have time to work on it. And as well, if I try to do that, and I try to be quite precise, actually, right now, I got only one who came to me to work on one specific thing. communication on program multisectoriality. Okay. As you saw, there is several activities in this program, and we wanted to show this multisectoriality. This you are working on health, but you are working as well on nutrition. You are working on food security, and you are doing all of this in the same time for the same beneficiaries. We want to show your this type of intervention and show that you are not only working on one specific thing, and all of these contribute to enforce the resilience of population. So there are communication departments in all of this, not all of this, but in several of these members. But they are quite busy with their program, they are quite busy with the communication of their NGO, and nobody has time as well to work on this specific thing. So few of them have communication department, and all the others do not have, and we have to train them, etc. But actually, there is no much, and NGO staff poorly mobilized and trained. I'm talking about the staff who are on the field, not the communication actually. But those staff who are implementing activities, they are not so keen or so motivated or whatever, or so trained to provide information and to work on communication. Okay, so the same thing actually, we collect data on these specific communication activities, try to make a database with different categories, and say, okay, at the end, and we provide the data to all of them to show them that for one consortium, you are focusing on this one. Can you balance? You know, this is nutrition. So one is focusing on nutrition, the other is focusing on food security, the other one is focusing on cash transfer, etc., etc. So we try to show them, to all of them, at the same time, that they have different ways to approach this communication, and we ask them to balance the way, to change a bit the way they are doing it, just by providing reports and showing them what are they doing. So what we have learned, NGO visibility advocacy, 5 minutes. NGO visibility advocacy, this is a consortium, this is a big, a big consortium. And the collection of data, the primary data, help us to have really reinforced visibility advocacy all of them. We can show that we participate to national strategy. I mean, when we collect data, it's really, really big. So we can show that. And people are listening to us. It's important as well, again, I think, that we keep this data collection capacity, or data to be able to combine it and to present it at NGO level. When it comes to OCHA is focusing on UN, and we saw it when they took over. Actually, our data was not included in the first place. So they were collecting WFP, etc., UNICEF data. But at the end, the NGO data was not their primary focus. So current IM tools. Yeah, it's quite interesting, and I saw a lot of things that interest me. But actually, there is not much. I mean, on the ground, on the field, there is not much person who are able to do that. There is no people who are trained on tools. Definitely not. There is a really. You saw the data I drew myself on the Visio I used to put colors. All these members are interested for me to train them on that. None of them had a clue of what we are talking here. Not at all. Okay. Yeah, bit challenging. I mean, to collect data with 30 partners, you are not the donors. They listen to you if they want. So to be able to collect data for clue, one, provide them before they ask. some interesting information so that can help them to find funding or who can help them to increase their visibility. So we provide things before we ask, or we try to collect, to provide things before we asking them too much information. Facilitate data collection. Data collection. Low workload. It's really important. People do not have time. Really do not have time. If you provide something which it needs them a lot of work to do, you will not receive anything. So we try as much as we can to facilitate it. Name shaming, I presented before. We provide reports at eye level with the name of those who have contributed each time. And they know it, actually. So when they didn't see their name, they come back really quickly to say, oh, we are not at what you presented. Please add our data. And donor support. We use that as well, with ECHO, for example, but with others. Asking, it's not me who asks, actually, it's the donor who asks. And if the donor asks, people respond a lot more. Or we try to include, actually, this start to make it more compulsory to provide data on the same format. Yeah, but we use the same. Last one, limited resources context. Definitely, we do not have much money to organize this kind of cell, and it needs specific profile, I think. That means a guy who is able to create IAM tools, but as well who is who is ready to spend hours and hours to collect data, to put it in the framework, whatever. There is this load of work, and if the person is not ready and is able to create things, but doesn't want to go everywhere and collect data and spend hours and hours on that, it will not work. And last lesson learned is data mapping strengthens its legitimacy, because when you do a map, people listen to you, it's quite fun. But if I provide a table with data, okay. But if I provide just a map to decide the decision makers, they just think that these data are more accurate or more legitimate just because I did a map and a map like I showed you. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel, and thank you again for coming all the way from Burkina Faso to share your experience. You were telling me before that it's the first time that Michel participates in the GONG, and he's what we call a non-technical person, right? So he was actually really, I think it's refreshing to see all the solutions that exist, but also kind of surprised to see everything that exists and so little that actually is used in the field. So I think that was a really useful perspective, and I like the name shaming concept. I mean, I like it now. I'm a research officer. I don't think I would have liked it on the other side as an NGO staff. We're gonna move forward with Lorraine. So quite a different experience. We're moving from West Africa, the sometimes forgotten world of West Africa, to the very not forgotten world of Syria in terms of information management, right? And she's gonna tell us about Learn a bit more.
Yes. So, as Lisa was mentioning, I replaced her as the mail advisor 4 months ago, and at the time that really the Learn was being drafted, designed, and we were moving ahead with the first steps. So in terms of how it was designed, I've just put numbers here for you on Syria, for those who might not be familiar, but the crisis has been going on for 8 years. We're talking about 13.1 million of people that require assistance based on the humanitarian needs overview. Half of those are internally displaced, and 5.6 million are considered with acute needs. The four rest, so 33% of housing across Syria has been destroyed, 35% are forced to rely on unsafe water sources, 50% of health facilities are closed, and only 1 in 3 children is missing live vaccines. So the idea behind those numbers was to kind of design a project that is multi-sectoral, and we talk about multi-sectoral programs, but to see it in action, for us it meant that we had to partner with organizations that were able to provide those services, or the services that we don't provide. So the acronym is Linking Emergency Assistance and Response in Northeast Syria, becoming Learn Syria. It's funded over 2 years by Opta, and it's about $50 million US. We're talking about 4 partners and 1 sub-award grantee, so different partners, different size, different cultures, different, both international and local. We're looking at 3 main sectors of response, same focusing on the basic needs, so health, wash, and shelter. Health, wash, and shelter, yeah. And we have integrated a rapid response mechanism emergency component. The idea is also to put in the proposal and in our commitment an improvement of the humanitarian coordination, especially because in the NES and the WASH sector might not be present, so it's led by NGOs. Which leads to what strategies do we have for the learn? And maybe I've looked at it with a public health background, so I've prevented myself from putting preventive and curative, but so I've transformed it into preventive and responsive as 2 different approaches, centralized and single, and then decentralized and multiple approaches for every partner within the consortium. To take it a bit back a few steps, when I was having a discussion with CartONG, actually with Maeve and Edmond, to see what other experience of IAM in consortium CartONG might have had in the past. We somehow had some idea of what we wanted, but without doing the needs assessments first. And so it was kind of a wake-up call of, you're really going to do what we say shouldn't be done, what we recognize in the sector as not a proper practice. So that led us to a deployment by Edmond to kind of do a needs assessment of our teams via different partners to be able to really implement something that would fit everyone. We've come down to these 2 approaches to which we're letting the field take a decision on. And the consortium team, we have an IAM manager that we've separated from the meal, and so we have 2 different groups, I guess, or 2 different teams within the consortium coordination team. The idea is, okay, are we going to really start creating tools and impose them on partners as we are the lead? We're doing joint assessments and make sure that the data collection and management is harmonized. Obviously, that seems like a preferred option, but we also have partners with different cultures and with very strong IAM beliefs as well. And I think you were mentioning one of the questions was how do we combine the ideologies of different partners? And so that would be allowing each partner to still have their IAM approach, whether pre-existing ones in the region or newly developed. So having that flexibility to have different tools, but that we would have one common tool, and that the consortium coordination team role is to actually compile that data and make sure that it's shareable and aggregated. We have not yet taken a decision on this. I think from the discussions that we've had, it's likely going to fall in the middle on some sectors or some bits and pieces. So what we've learned so far, I've added the so far because I do see it as an opportunity to learn more, especially for Solidarité, where we are starting to ramp up the IAM. It might seem like already obvious and known facts, but it's always nice to hear them again. And I think if you hear it but have not experienced it, you don't realize how important they are. So I'm repeating. The importance of a specific IAM needs assessments to maintain neutrality and objectiveness, making sure that what we impose or what we choose is not from an HQ versus perspective versus a field one. It also allows to identify weaker points and do a proper risk analysis to know what we have to focus on in the first months of the project. It also allows you to have a roadmap before the beginning of the project, especially if you don't really know where you're going and if you don't have that experience within your teams, making sure that the people that arrive have some kind of idea what the direction we want them to be going in. It also highlights the challenges of the decision-making process. So as I was mentioning, so that was 4 months ago that we were in the first stages, but really the pressure to make a decision was in August, September, because the project was supposed to start on the 1st of October. But realize is that the pressures that people may put, we still haven't chosen a system to say, and it's already end of October, so all of that kind of shifts. That challenge is linked to what do we want versus what do we need, so coming back to the IM needs assessment, to the presence of an IM culture in organizations, and it is dependent on the sector scale and capacity of partners. There's budget in that as well. So we have, for the first time, an IM budget line on a project, but it's still less than 0.1% of the overall budget. So we're really happy because it feels like it's a lot of money, but it actually isn't. And the third one is the need for common language and expectations. That one I think should be familiar to a lot of you. What is IM? What is data management? What is IT? What is all of that wonderful need for proper definitions? With that link to the scope and the objectives for IM, and budget and sizing. Actually, yeah, it's kind of in both. The IM manager mentioned that actually a TOR for what IM would be at the proposal stage would have helped in solidifying the decisions, and that was included in the proposal. So I'm just sharing. Sharing is caring. Necessity of tools that are interoperable. That same thing. That seems like an obvious one. But there's still the belief that one tool that does everything exists, and so really talking about the specificity of sectorial approaches with the tools that come with it is important to distill in every organization. I'm going to start with. That's what I have. Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So quite interesting to put these two into perspective, I thought, because it's kind of the same resilience programs at the end of the day. We have a meta-consortium and a consortium, so it's different scale, but it's kind of the same topic in different regions of the world. It's a different capacity and different way to look at it. I liked the sentence, we knew we wanted without doing a proper assessment. It sounds really familiar. It resonates with a lot of things that I've done myself and heard as well. And also interesting to ask yourselves, is good enough? First, I thought you were going to say good enough is having a responsive system in consortia. But
I'm not sure whether good enough
at the end of the day, yeah, right? So you mentioned the middle. Yeah. I'm curious to know what the middle is, right? Maybe we can invite you in 2 years to see what came out of this.
Hopefully not a fail fest.
Yeah, hopefully not a fail fest. We'll book you a ticket just in case. All right, cool. Super different topic. Chameleon is a slightly different animal, right? Oh, I didn't mean that they were. And your presentation is also focusing a little bit more on data sharing, which is refreshing, right? Because we haven't talked too much about architecture. Just kidding. So yeah, let's go.
I realized listening to you that what I'm gonna say is mainly applicable to small-scale consortium. I mean, nothing of what I'm going to say would work with the 30 members. I didn't even know that existed. But,
Sure.
Thanks. So Chameleon is a new type of project. It's actually, so the 4 donators appointed those 3 NGOs to monitor WFP project. So it's a cash project, multi-purpose and unconditional cash. And so we need monitoring and we need evaluation on the value for money. Is it a better solution than having many NGOs? Is it better to have one main centralized project? And so there are there's a lot of learning and monitoring to do on a UN agency project. So we will have a sample of Syrian families, and they are targeted because some families has to receive the cash, some others has to not receive the cash. They have to be geographically smoothly spread. They have to respect quotas of age, disease, etc. to be representative, to have a significant statistical study. So we have to know the families we are going to interview before doing it. So we have names, phone numbers, addresses to reach them, which is very sensitive data because we are in a conflict zone in Lebanon, close to the Syrian border, and we have lists of thousands of names and phone numbers and etc. So it will determine our main issues. So first, the data flow. We received the personal data from the UNHCR, from families that consented to be reached by research agencies, institutions. So they consented to give their names. So we, NRC, received this sensitive data. NRC in this consortium is the data controller, which is a new concept brought by the GDPR. So we are liable about what's done with the data. So we receive, at NRC, we receive the sensitive data. We share the data with EDS, an implementing partner that will actually organize and conduct the survey. So they will reach out to the families. So they interview the families. So they gather personal information from them, and the data is stored on the Survey CTO platform. Survey CTO is the piece of software used for the surveys. Then the data is given back to NRC, the whole data across the same channel, and then NRC will share the data with other implementing partners that will make the statistical studies, the compilation, the research, that will go to focus groups for other pieces of research, etc. Then we have the partners in the consortium. So with those partners, we don't share sensitive data. It's only like project things. They mainly bring expertise and technical advice, but the partners in this consortium are not really into the implementation. Their contribution, we will see after, is more of a strategic and expertise. So our problem is that if you, in any link between a computer and a cloud, you have to send your login and password. And this is quite easy to intercept. So we have here, everywhere we have lists with thousands of personal data concerning Syrian refugees, highly sensitive, and each time we want to access it, we kind of give away the login and password. So we need to share, we need the cloud, but we need to protect this. So in consortium, we will have some challenges in building a solution, because we have, it was said already, we have, we are clearly in the responsive part of the graph. Everybody has their culture, their setup, their legal bounds, their there are donor constraints, etc. So we have to take this into account. Simplicity of the solution. It's not to be fancy because, I mean, if your solution is not simple enough, users will find workarounds. If you are under pressure, you have a deadline, at one point if it's too complicated to type a huge password 10 times, you will just get your USB flash and take the sensitive file and give it away, and you can jeopardize the whole security setup. And then technical standards to try to be reusable and adjustable to all the users, to all different setups. It's always better to use the standards to be open. So when you can meet partners' requirements and technical standards, you have a kind of universality, at least maybe not universality, total one, but maybe harmonization inside your consortium data sharing setup. Simplicity and partners' requirement leads to agility because you need to be able to fix a problem very, very rapidly and to have quick response. And when there's a new partner, because it happens, you have a new partner in the consortium, and to quickly include them in the solution, in the data sharing solution. And finally, technical standards and simplicity is hard to do actually. We need, I mean, we are not developers, so we are going to use tools already existing and made by developers. And this leads us to free and open source software. Because free also means fast, no license, no subscription, no payment, no contract, whatever, no provider. And open source is safer because the source code has been reviewed by experts, by academics, so it's better than proprietary with malicious devices or flaws or bugs or whatever. So FOSS is, I think, is a much better choice, especially when tools exist in FOSS. So this whole thing leads to something I believe is consortium friendly. So what was our existing setup in the consortium? Although there are like many problems with the monopolistic position of Microsoft, I believe, I'm sure, there is at least one positive point. It's that everybody has it, so it's kind of already harmonized with the operating systems and the cloud, and so the sharing channels. So to go back to our data flow, note the central position of NRC because NRC is the data controller. We can remove the partners because we had to prioritize, and we're only talking about focusing on sensitive data. So of course we can do nothing about UNHCR and the families. So we are here, and we need to secure this. ServiceCTO has a built-in encryption feature, so this is perfect. We use it. Then we have only Windows computers and OneDrive clouds as a channel. This is harmonized. This is the good side of having Microsoft. And the data is mirrored on all the computers accessing the cloud. So we all have this OneDrive folder on our computer. So what happens on a given computer, instead of having those sensitive files in our OneDrive folder shared with other people and that are like this on the cloud and encrypted, we are going to remove them from the cloud and put them back, but encrypted, an encrypted version. I draw a laundry machine because this is actually what encryption does. It takes the data and scrambles it completely. You have a key to unscramble it. And as you can see, it's long. And that's kind of inconvenient. And I will go back to this a little bit after. Because it's actually like this. it's happening like this on computers. So everything is secured now. We have only encrypted things. So if someone intercepts the login and password, they will only gain access to encrypted files, and unless they have this huge key, they can do nothing about it. But it's long, as we said, and it's also inconvenient because each time the user wants to access a file, they have to unencrypt it, to decrypt it, and to type a huge password, because if the password is not huge, it's useless. Anyway, so it's not very convenient for each file to do that. So we would like to have another solution to have a clear version of the files to work on, but not shared, and to share the encrypted version. And there's a tool, an open source tool, doing that, so it's free and it's very easy to use. It's CryptSync, and so you seamlessly you work on your clear files, and it will synchronize and repeat the modifications on your encrypted files. And it's shared, so if someone else has the same setup and modified their clear file, the modification will reach the encrypted version, and it will reach your files too. So it's like for the users, it's transparent. There's no change, except it's another folder. It's not anymore the OneDrive folder. The only remaining risk is if the computer is stolen, accessed. So it's better to enclose the whole setup in an encrypted container, which VeraCrypt does very well and for free. So actually, there is a password to enter when you want to open the container, and then you work as long as you want in the with your clear files. But yeah, so there is at one point there is one big password to be able to type like once or twice a day. So lessons learned, a lot actually. As was already said enough, the IAM strategy should have been preventive, should have been thought of before. It wasn't. So there were numerous, like a number of risks that we discovered we were vulnerable, and but Solidarité brought the expertise on that point and like really talked the consortium into improving their awareness and their resource. So it led to a 7% budget allocated to IAM. And we had to widen the notion of personal data, because in a conflict context, almost anything can be a personal data. Almost any data is very sensitive. So this leads us to agreements, because we had to write it down everything to write down everything about data protection, because of different awareness in the consortium, etc. So it was very long. It's not finished actually. Very long negotiation and writing and go back and forth. And it had impact on the technical solutions, whether they are accepted or not. So it was really long, and so it brought also a lack of visibility, because we wouldn't know if the solution we were thinking of will be accepted in the agreement. So anyway, it led to a better protection design, and it led to a definition of members' role, like in fact, not only on the paper. So who is the data controller, the implementer, who is entitled to do what with the data. We had to define, to better define everything. It led to evolution too, everyone, because as was said, everyone has their ideology and setup, etc. But at one point, everyone had to evolve a little bit and to change their habit and question their habit and ideology, because risks were not known, but they were present. So yeah, there were discussions, and everyone, I think, evolved from their positions. And about implementation, the design and test was a very long process. because we were talking about good enough. Here, good enough is perfection, because the data it's synonymous because the data must not be leaked, because it's too sensitive. This is theory, because in practice, good enough is being more expensive than the neighbor. I mean, the data is everywhere, like literally everywhere. If we want to be good enough, we have to be an expensive source of data, because the hacker, the stealer, the ill-intentioned entity will steal data from another source if we are too expensive. So this is the good enough part of data protection. And so anyway, yeah, we had to this long process was influenced by the negotiation of agreements, etc. And also the negative part is that we will need to hire a data protection officer and to maintain the solution and to map the data, to document all the data, which is demanded by the GDPR. But the positive ending thing is that we have a working solution, and we are not 30, we are only a few members, so we could install it at every member and train them, and so everything is being harmonized and secured, and it brought more awareness and at the same time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I have a new catch sentence, right? Good enough is being more expensive to steal from than the neighbor.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's a little bit cynical, but it's true.
I think that's how Bitcoin works at the end of the day. I mean, it's not new, but just need to maybe use it. Okay, great, thank you very much. So, I told you there was a lot of learning, right, to be done in how consortia are run. I also like the beginning on Microsoft, and it also reminded me that sometimes Microsoft is good enough. Sad. Okay, I think I'm gonna give the floor to you guys. If you have some questions on the presentations, I also might put up the first questions on the screen if you want to refer back to them. Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
I have 3 questions for Frédéric. 2 more technical and 1 more broad. First one would be, why did you choose to use containers instead of full disk encryption?
Disk encryption?
Yes, because that would serve all you secure all the data that you encrypt the whole disk.
So actually, we have disk encryption. I mean, this was very like the broad thing, but there are many other details in the setup. We have disk encryption because we are bound to it by a UNHCR, who gives us the data. But we added this because usually with Microsoft, disk encryption comes with BitLocker. So basically, when you give your window password, everything is unencrypted, is decrypted, and so if the computer is accessed while turned on, or accessed by a keylogger or by someone or by some bot or whatever, it's basically useless. So a container is something where you actively open it with a password and you close it when you don't need to work in it anymore. So I think it's like much more secure.
Second part was more a comment. You're losing the ability to work simultaneously on the same file when you have this sync thing, because OneDrive enables you to work simultaneously with notes that someone has opened the file, and you lose this ability.
Yes,
right?
we use actually, to be honest, we don't use anymore OneDrive. We did it with Google Drive, because OneDrive, you know, because of the VeraCrypt container, when the container is closed, your cloud software doesn't detect its folder anymore, and OneDrive is yelling error messages, crashing, and you have to restart it yourself. Google Drive just does nothing and just waits, so it's more robust and it's faster, by the way. But you're right, you're losing this. when we were doing it with OneDrive, it was only a storage facility and not the collaborative platform with all the functionality.
And the third one is, how do you prevent, or if you prevent, an encrypted storage on your shared drive? So if someone just saves an Excel file with sensitive data on your OneDrive or Google Drive, is that prevented from the computer? Or moving the file to a thumb drive?
There is no automated detection.
So it's just education.
Yes, yes. But that's a good point. I should think of it. Yeah, I will think of it.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a comment for Lauren. So you told us the belief that one tool that does it all persists. The comment I would like to make is you should oppose these people, the slogan, the motto, the right tool for the right job. And I think it's really, as a computer scientist, I think I can't overemphasize the importance of this. Computer science is no longer, or software engineering is no longer about running one software for you on your computer. It's about exchanging data. It's about information management, which is actually a new word that was coined because of the rise of networks. So you have to focus, to have a strong focus on interoperability, as you told us. And I think one word was, two words we are missing about that. The words are protocols, or which protocols do you choose to adhere to, and which file formats do you choose. And I think it's a very important point to focus on.
Yeah. No, and it's part of the report, but it's not what I decided to focus too much on. But yeah, that's part of the work of CartONG, was also to look at those formats that you were mentioning. What I find is that if multiple people tell the same or say the same message, it is more likely to be heard. So what I had said in the beginning, CartONG is saying it again, and maybe the field will say it again once they have done their processing as well. And so that kind of expertise of multiple people and of different people tends to reassure.
And perhaps to comment on the fact that, so I wrote this report, but with the fact that people wish to have one tool to fit all their needs is also part of the cultural or the organizational level, that people want that. I train my team to one tool, and this tool is able to make everything, because when you need to, it's still not in the mind that you need to have some dedicated IAM skills, because it means that as you want to run different software for different needs, so that means you need to have skills which are able to do this. And this is still not the case, as Ryan said, when you have 0.1% of your budget, 50 million budget, which is dedicated just to IAMs, that means you still need to have very few tools, otherwise it will be a nightmare to manage at some point. So you have to deal with these constraints.
You have to choose the right tools, but I don't believe in the Swiss Army knife. Do you know any professional?
I don't believe it at all. But just
of course, you have to. You can't have. You can't master 1,000 tools, but you have to have a toolbox, and to have tools you need in your toolbox. And the tool I need are probably not the one you need. But maybe we have some in common, and maybe we can collaborate even if we don't use the same tools, because we just are able to exchange data through open files format or open protocols.
But it's interesting to note that there is no service provider in the room, because this is also service provider are pushing also at some point when they're working with organizations to have that okay, I select your product, so that means you will work with this product for all your organization level and this kind of thing. So there's this transparency, and that there's also limits as there is no open shared standard formats to exchange data between some kind of tool. So this is also a limit, and it's interesting to know that there is no service provider.
Yeah, maybe we should have the consortia being even more sexy, so that it becomes sexy for service providers to actually think of it. No, but I don't think it's an actual interesting market share at the moment, because organizations are more likely to buy in that consortium that are like, blur entities and do not have like straight directions and positioning. But I hope it's changing.
I mean, on that, in West Africa, large grants, large multilateral grants tend to be now oftentimes required if you're in a consortium together. And the current model, for better or for worse, is that you have one sort of designated coordinating body. In many cases, this ends up being the SILS, if you work in the Sahel. That tends to be the most common coordinating body. And what basically ends up happening is you end up in a situation where knowledge management is supposed to be taken care of by one party, but unless that party has an active interest in keeping the information flow going, it falls apart. I mean, it just goes to shit very quickly. And I think we've all seen situations where unless the coordinating actor has a real solid own interest in that data, there's really not a whole lot that the participating members of the consortium can do to get, to sort of keep a nice flow of information going.
That's why they create this the cell I mean, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, they do it, but they don't put the money. I mean, there is no budget actually for IM. Yeah. There is a budget for advocacy, because this is the thing they are interested in. So we have a lot of work on advocacy, but there is no specific budget for IM at all. Yeah? So yeah, it's interesting to have one body who is concerned about sharing data among members. But after that, you need as well, and there is tension there, because the money which is given to the cell, coordination cell, is the money which is not going to the different consortia. So they are ready to do it, but in the same time, they know that it's going to be taken on their budget. So yes and no, and then at the end, no.
I don't have the full story behind the chameleon, but I think that it was interesting to note that as at some point when one of the stakeholders of the consortium put under the light that there was this issue on the data protection, that we moved from no budget to 7% of budget dedicated to IM through the benefit of data protection, that we need to put resources on it. I think this is good things to keep in mind, that we can also change if we are taking this at some point, and with perhaps a good argument also.
I think also just as the consortium itself, Chameleon existing as a kind of evaluation of WFP and UNHCR, but that could be applied to just meta consortium with another third party monitoring of the work that's being done in other settings.
Yeah. Well, AFD, is anyone from AFD? No, they're not here, I think. Groupe acts as the learning partner in two currently funded AFD programs in West Africa. So in Mali, it's the Meta Consortium, like the equivalent of what you're doing. And on Chad Lake, kind of like a resilience program. So like ACF actually has the lead, for example, for this one on the program, but then Groupe has a learning role. But it's a research institute, so I work for them, I like them. But still, it's not an IM body as such. Like there was no dedicated IM money. When I came in, we were like, okay, so what do we do now? So again, it's like a step in, but it would be even better if you had dedicated like institute with body with expertise.
Yeah. Just to link it, there is money for what is called when beneficiaries are concerned. So yeah, to secure data, because then this is key. there is money. To make some research, no problem, you can find. More difficult, but you can find. But for the management of the consortium, to share information among members, to make it more that it work better. For this, it's a lot more complicated to have a budget for that.
Where do you find the money for data protection and to secure the data?
Right now, we do not have. We are working through government. Actually, it's not the same. It's not so important than for them. Actually, for the beneficiaries, it started to be, but it was not so much. We didn't collect so much data on beneficiary. It started because we are trying to put the list of beneficiaries into the social register of the government. So we are trying to see how this is going to be. Yeah, but we are going to link our activities with the World Bank. The World Bank have a system. They are working with the Social Security Department, and then we are trying to see how this is going to be. But we are not the one who are designing this data management.
I think to get on the point about the money for information management, especially for consortia, I mean, I think that there is money out there. I mean, from, again, limited to my experience in West Africa, I find donors, the big traditional donors, to be quite receptive to the idea of financing IM projects. And, you know, since the humanitarian sector always tends to be a couple of years behind everyone else, very soon, now that everyone is, you know, interested in GDPR, like probably in a couple of years, we're going to catch up on the humanitarian sector, is all of a sudden going to realize, oh, you know, we need to put money into this. So, I mean, there is, I think, money to be had, and I think that, you know, a packaged program, you know, specifically for a consortium with IM, like, can get financing from the traditional donors, especially considering, you know, how cheap a lot of times these interventions can be. You know, like what can be done with $50,000 or $100,000 can, you know, really be revolutionary for a consortium. So I think there is a possibility to market this to donors and to get financing for a consortium.
I think the money you're talking about is a little amount compared to what I believe would be necessary. In terms of data sensitivity and complexity, I think what we can compare the humanitarian data to in the real life, let's say, is the banking data. In terms of sensitivity and complexity, because banks have addressed this issue of sharing their data for transfers since decades already, with IBM in the 60s, etc. So they know a lot about sensitivity and sensitiveness and complexity and interoperability. And banks spend like tens of millions per year on that because they have a real awareness of the issues. And I think before the humanitarian sector reached that stage, I mean, it will take a lot of scandals and a lot of time.
Yeah, to your point, these are some numbers that were given to me by my CIO really recently, where banks put in about 25% of their budgets towards IT.
Yeah.
The humanitarian sector puts it around, on average, and this is like a big average, 8%. I work for Oxfam, we don't put it 8% in.
Yeah.
And Oxfam is quite big. So I'm not going to say how much, but that's to give you an idea, and I completely agree with you that the amount of data and the sensitivity of the data, it's very, very similar to the banking, but we don't invest enough in it. And it's because when you ask money from donors or from people on the street, you say you're actually going to pay for a computer to house some encrypted files. People are like, well, no, I don't. Why would I? That's not the vision people have. And to the other points of, we're going to catch up at some point because it is going to be important, but there's that delay. And that I think this mentality that that's not what you're doing. You're not supposed to be buying IT. You're supposed to be helping people. And I think there's a disconnect between that.
Yeah, scandals will help.
Unfortunately, they do. But yeah.
I have a technical question for Frédéric. So passwords are no longer the best practices in security management. So did you consider using crypto tokens?
As long as it doesn't, actually we store the passwords in VeraCrypt encrypted container, so locally, because we don't want to send, even encrypted, we don't want to send the keys on internet. So we actually, I generate ridiculously complex passwords with Armenian characters, like something no keyboard can do.
Okay.
And I store them in the encrypted.
So what I call the problem with password is the post-it problem.
Is what?
The post-it problem.
Post-it.
The fact that the password is written on a post-it on your screen.
Nobody can write
Because nobody has to write to type those passwords. It's inserted in the CryptSync tool. So actually, the only password.
So which one?
The only password the users have to type is the VeraCrypt. Is the VeraCrypt thing. So I train my users to build strong passwords, and I can tell you, I mean, it's a little recipe. Use patterns on your keyboard, like 30 characters, with or without uppercase, shift, with or without shift, and to make something meaningless that would be otherwise impossible to remember, just draw patterns on your keyboard, like X's or like this, and with or without the shift button. So you will have digits, lowercase, uppercase, special characters, anything, and it's easy to remember for you. Of not obvious patterns like AZERTY, QWERTY, whatever, so like a little bit more elaborated patterns.
Okay, I think we should discuss this issue.
This is a little bit more about access rights than just, I mean, there are some processes of like, who gets access to what? So are you a data encoder? Are you a data processor? Are you a data manager? Are you a controller? And then sectioning off your information platforms into who gets what type of access, and then putting multiple barriers attached to that. I mean, you're not going to, for some organizations, it's almost impossible for data encoders to manage all of like changing the passwords all the time. And so you have to section off what is the role and responsibility of what you want people to contribute to your information platform. And I think this is kind of figuring out what is, the risks that we have, and then identify, you don't want a random person to be able to download all of your data and send it off to someone. You want to make sure that whatever you're putting in, whatever comes out is specifically managed by different people. And I think that's the, from a consortium standpoint, we need to start thinking about what are, proper access rights, where are the areas that are risks, what are the things that we need to ensure that are backbone for systems to function in some of the environments that we're working in, because we're not going to be able to put all of the complex computer science security measures in the middle of an emergency, or even in a place where there's limited resources. And so figuring out what part is our responsibility of practitioners from managing these platforms and the systems and the processes to make the end user most kind of comfortable with what they're doing and protect information.
So we should all go to the next door roundtable to hear more about that. Maybe a couple questions.
I have a question. So I think we've talked a lot about data that should be kept private within the consortium, but I think sometimes, or maybe most times, we have private data sets, but also some part that could go public. If you just lock it down somewhere, this part which could be opened will never get for us, for example, to OpenStreetMap or to HDX or to some other platforms. Like, any thoughts on this, how to really make it easier for organizations within the consortium to split data into private parts and open parts?
Maybe before you answer that, if you want, is makes me think of, I was having a discussion with Alice Aubrecht from ALNAP a couple of weeks ago about this specifically, and she was calling it a data war. The term is, it's too much, but so it's basically considering that some organizations are winning the data war. So a lot of the times organizations are doing registration, for instance, like prima facie registration, so the UN agencies would hold all this data, and then sometimes data protection is actually used as an excuse for not sharing. And we saw this, so you came in a bit after, I think, the war happened, but it did happen on Chameleon, where there was a lot of holding back from organizations, and even the donors had to come in and say, okay, it's about data protection, but it's also about transparency and how make it public and common for everyone.
Yeah, you can. It costs. It would cost a lot, and the humanitarian world is, as we said, is not ready yet to spend a lot of money. But it would be quite straightforward to build tools that either take subsets of data and you configure it to take non-sensitive subsets of data to go public, or to automatically aggregate what needs to be aggregated and make the aggregated result available. So this is at the same time the curse and the bliss of computer science. It's like you can do absolutely anything, but you have to put money for it because it's long, and so. Yeah.
Give you one last question, if there is a burning one. Yes.
About the money again, what do you think? Like, what donors would be the most willing to contribute to IM improvements in programs or consortiums? For example, which donor has like IM departments, or IFD, they have an evaluation department, but do they have IM specialists, or do you see a trend in the donors among different donors around this question?
Talk about your specific donors.
For the EU, yes, but it's not obvious. But I think there is not, at the time the proposal are given, there is not so hard pressure to provide budget and saying, okay, we need this IM to run the entire consortium. And I don't think that the 5 of them didn't put so much. These 5 consortium, and definitely not for the cell, the coordination cell. So I think there is as well they could be ready, but in the budget, and maybe because, as you mentioned, because if you put too much on support, at the end they just say no, it's a bit too much, and I think they all reach the maximum without having included enough IM. Yeah, it's just that the budget of support is already big. From donors' perspective. So yeah, I think they are not so reluctant, but it's just that, and there is no much pressure, I think, and it's particularly when you provide the budget to the donors. It's not done.
And there is perhaps no donor trends, but more regional trends. Also, like from the Middle East crisis, you cannot really answer right now without an budget line at some time, at least.
Yeah,
it would look strange to your other NGO, something like that. So I'm not sure that this will move to other parts of the world, but at least in one part of the world, there is this trend.
Burkina is considered like a development country, or I don't know. Not, well, anyway. But yeah, at the end, it's a long-term program. They consider it as a long-term program. So it decreased the amount you can ask compared to emergency, where you can ask a lot for support because you have to provide quickly and etc. For such kind of project, 2-3 years, means it's definitely less.
It also shows, just how we think about it as support, even though if we switch that thinking and consider it as part of programming and a part of good programming and what it means to be able to respond for such intervention, I will need also this and this and this. maybe that can start shifting the conversations.
I work a lot with the Gates Foundation, and they are pretty much data literate, and they mandate that data you produce in a project is public in the end. So it's not exactly support in information management, but it's a requirement, and they know what they're talking about. So when you candidate in a tender, they are looking at your answers on these topics.
Yeah, they see that as an added value. Yeah.
I think donors read mainstream newspaper. So, I mean, right now we are talking about GDPR, and so they are willing to be GDPR compliant, and they consent to give a little bit of money for this. And that's why I was also talking about scandals, because when scandals will come out in the newspaper, they will probably put some money on this.
And I believe there's some education to be done as well. So that's why I personally like CartONG and also the work that is being done by CartONG and some other actors to also not say that technology in the ed sector is blockchain and drones and like fancy innovation. And I think there is still there is a constant continuous education to be done on that. Like operational needs are much less sexy, but at the end of the day, this is where the money is required most of the time. And data protection is one of them, right? I guess time is up, right? So maybe just a super short summary of what I'm taking over from this. I let you reflect on your take. So Consortium is actually, it's kind of like a party. It's like, if you throw a little barbecue, you kind of can get away with the beers that you have in the fridge and the kind of people that you know, and everything is going to be smoothly and fine. But if you kind of want to throw something like we had yesterday, you're going to have to prepare and get structured and get the right people in place, to do groceries and have the right beverage and the right food for everyone. And so I can see opportunity if I'm positive. I'm optimistic today. Someone in the audience, you were mentioning it's about choosing the right tool for the right job, and I think in Consortium you've got to get it right. So you got to have the good jobs with the good roles and responsibilities, with the good protocols and file formats and access rights as well. So it's more about that, and then also about the tool. But this is very important. We talked about budgets, and that's very interesting because we throw 0.1% that was in Syria, and then 7% in Lebanon, and then you were mentioning a bank you're actually spending 20% on IT. It's what's good enough between all these numbers? I'm not sure we have the answer, but that's a good question. And the last thing is about, it is a responsibility to keep asking for enough budget and enough resources, and also to keep what data protection is going to entail in mind, but not using as an excuse. That's also what I take from it, because it can be the case. Also, maybe one last point. So thank you for coming. Check our website, a little bit of advertisements. So my name is not Tears. Everyone's name is Tears now. Groupe's website, because we might actually publish some research in the coming years on Consortium. If we might partner up with CartONG to have an IM component in it. And again, if you're interested in participating in that, maybe you can look forward to reaching to me. Thank you very much for participating. And thank you again.